Throughout the first two seasons of The Dragon Prince, fans have been waiting for Rayllum, or the pairing of Rayla and Callum, to finally occur, and in Season 3, they got their wish. Midway through the season, back when it was released in November of 2019, which honestly seems like a very, very long time ago, midway through this season, they finally started a relationship. Now, it was awkward at first. It was not clean and easy and comfortable for them both. Rayla made the first move, kissing Callum in the desert, and then freaking out when he did not immediately return her affections, even though, in reality, this did not indicate that he didn't like her, but rather that he didn't know what to do. He didn't know how to respond to her kissing him. He had never thought that was going to happen. Because of this, the relationship between them sours for a bit, and they're constantly fighting until the end of the next episode, in which Callum finally decides how he feels about her. He loves her, and he wants to be with her, and he kisses her. The relationship persists for the rest of the season. Like all teenagers infatuated with each other, they're very obviously in love. Their affections for each other are not subtle. But honestly, it's kind of endearing because they have each other. It's a long, hard journey, and they've suffered a lot, but they have each other. The relationship developed relatively quickly, but when you're trapped on the road with someone for months straight, it can have that effect on you. This relationship has become pretty popular, and rightly so. I think it's quite a good one. But it might surprise some of you to learn that this was not planned from the beginning. Now, I've heard some people express the opinion that they're disappointed that the show turned the relationship between Rayla and Callum from being platonic to being romantic. They say it falls into cliché. I say there's a big difference between cliché and archetype. Just because something falls into our collective ideas about how things normally work does not make it bad any more than it makes it good. It just is. Now, I've argued against the point that Rayla and Callum coming together is cliché at length before, and they probably will do so again in the future at this point, but for now I'll just say this. Are we really supposed to dismiss all teenage couples who fall in love on fantasy journeys just because that idea has been done before? A lot? That's ridiculous. What matters is whether it's done well, and by done well I mean whether it feels organic, whether it feels like an honest depiction of the feelings of two people, and this does to me. When I bring up those who are disappointed by this relationship happening, I'd like y'all to consider, why is that? Why were they disappointed? If the relationship were telegraphed from the start, they wouldn't have been disappointed because they wouldn't have thought it would turn out any other way. And the relationship is not telegraphed from the start because there's no attempt to kind of artificially construct a romantic relationship between Rayla and Callum. And that's ultimately why I like this pairing. It's natural. And I'd argue that a major reason why it feels like that is because it was not planned out ahead of time. This is remarkable considering that, like most animated showrunners, the showrunners of The Dragon Prince had a lot of different aspects of the show planned out ahead of time. All the bones of the show were set in place before the show even entered production. This does not mean that they had every single storyline for every single character worked out, and it doesn't mean that they had anything written down in stone. But it does mean they had a general and intricate plan for the show, and that plan did not involve Rayllum at any point. Now, I bring this up because it's a cool piece of trivia, but I also bring it up to make a point. There is a big emphasis in fan discourse these days on the idea that everything should be planned out ahead of time in a series. People bring up the Marvel Cinematic Universe as an example of why that works, and they bring up, oh, I don't know, what's the failed property du jour? Say the Star Wars sequel trilogy as an example of what can happen when you don't plan everything out. But that's kind of a silly and reductionist view of things. It's a very limited view. I mean, what are the most acclaimed shows of all time? Breaking Bad, The Sopranos? Those shows did not have everything planned out ahead of time. They had a general idea of what they wanted to do with the characters, but the actual meat of the narratives developed organically. Or think about something that everyone loves these days, like the original Star Wars trilogy. Was that planned out ahead of time? No, of course not. It's obviously not planned out ahead of time, or you wouldn't have things that are really questionable in retrospect, like Leia kissing Luke. When, of course, they're siblings. Meanwhile, Marvel's intricately planned films have left me a little cold recently. They lay out their 5-year plans for world domination, and they make a bunch of functional movies to get there, and, well, that works for a lot of people, but it doesn't quite work for me. And do you know what else had an ending planned out ahead of time? A series that everyone treated like a piñata in 2019, Game of Thrones. That show had a terrible ending, and one of the main reasons the ending was terrible is that they had a pre-planned out idea of where the show was going to go, and so they just kind of distorted the characters and the world to make sure they get there, even though it didn't feel right or earned or organic. The view that says you should follow your original plan to the letter, dotting every single little I and crossing every single little T, obscures what great art is really about, what it's always been about, and that's innovation, experimentation, boldness, trying new things. That's what Rayllum kind of represents for me, and that's why it works for me a lot better than relationships that are clearly very planned out ahead of time and are heavily telegraphed because of that. Now, let me take a step back and quote one of the show's co-creators, Justin Richmond, here. He was asked a question about Rayllum, and he responded, "So, that was not planned in Season 1, he said. If you had asked me, are they gonna get together? I'd be like, probably not." Think about that for a second. Here are a few more of his comments. Going into Season 3, there are those speeches in the middle of the first episode where Rayla is defending Callum. To Sol Regum, I think that just added to the fire. And then we get to the Oasis, and you know, it's really hard to be in an oasis at night with all kinds of romantic feelings. The writers have talked about the moment, also, where they realize that these two should be together. And that is about midway through Season 2. At this point, Rayla worries that she could have lost Callum, and she realizes how much losing him would have meant to her. It would have been devastating. And she realizes that's because she feels so strongly for Callum. That is when the writers recognized that this pairing was something special. This is when they recognized that they really had something there, and putting them together would not feel cliche or cheap. It would feel like a natural development of these characters' stories. It would be a natural progression of the chemistry that had already developed between them. Now, I recognize that fans can get a little insecure when they think about how rushed a lot of these things are, how last minute a lot of the developments they end up loving are. I can relate. I remember watching a behind-the-scenes special for a movie I really liked, and those involved revealed that they were not even anywhere close to being done with the movie when the trailer premiered. They had just enough finished footage to put out a trailer, and not much more than that. They were really running behind, and although the production came out on time, and you wouldn't know they were constantly rushed by looking at the finished product, they were all the time. And this is not anywhere near as uncommon as some neophytes might suspect. In the modern age, we have this bizarre love-hate relationship with artists. On one hand, we view them as these preternatural gods who meditate atop mountains and are struck by inspiration and then come down and share this inspiration with the world without changing a single word or a single concept. And on the other, we don't really respect the work they actually have to do. We don't really respect them as people. We, and by we, I mean a very certain subset of fans, tend to decry artists when artists don't do whatever the fans want. And yet, artists who do exactly what the fans want are sometimes decried anyway as not actually innovating. So it's a lose-lose situation. And what is in it for the artist, even if they do make something the fans like? Then the fans just revere them as gods, as these saintly figures who can do no wrong, and that's not a healthy attitude either. It's not conducive to the environment that develops great art. Art is beautiful and inspiring and gorgeous, and there is a difference between it and just the everyday, boring, quotidian banality of the modern world, but art is also work. The best ideas tend to come from conversation, from critique, from looking at the plan and wondering, is that really the best we can do? Isn't there a way we can do it better than that? And a lot of times there is. Compare the Rayllum pairing to the pairing of Aang and Katara in Avatar: The Last Airbender. Now, I do not hate the Aang and Katara pairing, and I'm only bringing it up at this juncture because it's a pairing that a lot of y'all fans of the Dragon Prince probably recognize. But in Avatar, the co-creators, Brian Konietzko and Michael Dante DiMartino, imbued the central pairing of Aang and Katara with an air of destiny. They should be together because the show clearly intends for them to be together. That kind of reductionist thinking. The show clearly focuses a lot more on Aang's views toward the matter than Katara's. What's strange is that Avatar gives us multiple reasons to believe that this pairing might not be the best thing in the world. They give us multiple reasons to distrust this pairing, and then they just expect us to go along with it anyway, which makes it feel less like a natural and organic step for these characters and more like something that was just arranged because the showrunners wanted it to happen. So yes, it's fine that the Rayllum pairing almost didn't happen. It's fine that it wasn't planned out ahead of time. I'd argue that what we ended up getting in this pairing is more dynamic and more compelling because there was no preconceived plan to try and get these two together. So thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like and comment and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can and you want to see more videos like this. Keep watching The Dragon Prince. It is a brilliant, lovely, evocative show, and it is only getting better as time goes by. Let's really hope that we get Season 4 of the show sometime before Western civilization is consumed in a climate change-induced apocalypse. Fingers crossed. Let's hope it doesn't take that long. Anyway, tune in soon for my next analysis. It will be coming soon. I promise you all that. Thank you all again. Adios, comrades.